Peter wait, look Kamla by the gate. No mercy, absolutely no mercy, Peter. Otherwise all of us go back with you. I want to say that despite all efforts to prevent us in the joint trade union movement from doing our task this afternoon, the task which we announced to the country, which has to do with the performance appraisal on this government. And if you had seen anything happen here earlier or even before, it was an attempt to prevent us from publicly doing a performance appraisal on camera and a corrupt government. But it failed. Before I go into what we have to say this afternoon, let me publicly express my thanks and appreciation for the outpouring of love and support that came from my colleagues and came from all of our members, everyone who came into contact with me today, expressing their condolences on the passing of my mother. May God rest her soul. And I agree with Comrade Elder. Unlike someone who is purporting to be mother of the country, my mother is totally unlike that. She was a very good, decent lady. God bless her soul. The chairman of this year's Labour Day rally, our friend and comrade, president of the Trinidad Unified Teachers Association, our comrade here, Comrade David Ancel. My comrades, leaders of the Joint Trade Union movement, sharing this Labour Day platform with me this afternoon on the occasion of our 70th anniversary at this historic Charlie King Junction. Members of the media, members of the various trade unions, members of the protective services, members of the civil society groups, youth, farmers, political and religious organizations, our retirees, sisters and brothers, well-wishers, our listening audience both home and abroad, friends and comrades, all of us gathered here in this historic period and at this critical moment in the history of the labor movement and our country. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. On behalf of all workers today, let me start, as I always do, by paying homage to the chief servant, Cuba Uriah Buzz Butler, the founding fathers, and so many thousands of faceless and nameless workers, the unsung heroes, martyrs and patriotic citizens of the past, all of whom are responsible for all the gains and achievements that we as a people enjoy today. You see, it is not just workers, but today the entire country continues to benefit from their sacrifices and struggle. We must always remind ourselves and country what Labor Day is all about, what this historic junction is about, and what this sacred and hallowed ground is all about. We must remember that 78 years ago, it was the ordinary people who relentlessly struggled for a better life, not only for themselves, but with their hope and aspiration for a better quality of life of all the people and for the future generations. They were the ones who set the foundation for our great nation. It is through that profound belief they made countless sacrifices, selfless sacrifices, shedding their blood, sweat, and tears, with some even giving their very lives yesterday, just to guarantee us a better quality of life today. It is because of this rich legacy that Labor Day today, on this platform, at this very Charlie King Junction, we will set the stage for a grand fight back. A fight back to defend all our terms and conditions of work and all our working class interests. It is a fight back to defend our freedom and democracy against any force, whether external or internal. In other words, it is a fight back to save our country. Today, we have absolutely no intention to abandon that rich legacy, and certainly we will never give up our struggle for revolutionary change. You see, if nothing else, by their actions, this UNC government made all of us realize that revolutionary change in Trinidad and Tobago is now absolutely necessary. Their corrupt abuse and misuse of our post-colonial state has shown clearly that our current system of governance and all our institutions are incapable of coping with this level of despotism and corruption. You see, they identified all the weaknesses in this system of governance, and instead of correcting it, they exploited it to the fullest for their own personal gain. Today, on June 19th, in the year of our Lord 2015, as we gather here at Charlie King Junction in our great numbers, we are gathering at a very dark period of our country's history. Make no mistake about it. This darkness is a dark cloud of fascism that is covering our land. We are under a UNC government dictatorship with a head despot, Kabla Prasad Pisesa, who has betrayed the workers and the people. 5 years ago, on this hallowed ground, through the Fyzabad Accord, they committed to new politics for a better Trinidad and Tobago, new politics is prosperity for all. But in fact, as soon as they get into government, without shame or care, they deliberately broke that Fyzabad Accord, and from then on, it was prosperity for themselves, their finances, their friends, and family. It is based on this clear understanding that we at the Joint Trade Union Movement selected a theme for this year's Labor Day commemoration, Betrayal of Workers, Betrayal of Funds. It is without doubt that this UNC government has dragged our country's name and reputation to an all-time low. Before, it was welcome to Trinidad and Tobago, the land of steel band, calypso, and limbo. Now today, under this corrupt UNC government, it is welcome to Trinidad and Tobago, land of steel band, calypso, and corruption. Sadly, under this UNC government, we have lost limbo to corruption. But today, why must we deal with this government and all of these burning issues as top priority? Why today, Labor Day? Well, it was on this Labor Day platform that our predecessors were dealing with the colonial powers, the then governor, the multinationals, and the foreign oil companies. In other words, our predecessors were very clear of the link between the political directorate and the hardship they were enduring on a daily basis. Today it is no different, except to say that what we are witnessing here in 2015 is not only neo-colonialism, but rather neo-slavery, neo-indentureship, and neo-fascism. And that is why all of us are here this afternoon. Today we are going to assess the performance of this government over the last 5 years. But to achieve this with any success, we must be brutally honest with ourselves, and we must be prepared to examine the facts as they exist, regardless of the consequences. It does not matter whether you are a UNC, TNN, ILP, MSJ supporter, or even a fanatic of any political party. The facts are the facts, and we must deal with them openly. Because it is you, the vast majority of honest law-abiding taxpaying citizens, will be negatively affected. This afternoon, we will be looking at 5 specific critical areas. We will assess the state of the economy and its performance under this government. We will examine their governance, their sustained attack on our independent democratic institutions, and their attack on people's organizations, namely trade unions and credit unions, among others. We will address major national issues such as the rampant corruption, the massive land grab, and other issues. We will also assess them on their disregard for the workers' agenda, very importantly, and their betrayal of workers. We will challenge the lies they are peddling about settling over 100 negotiations. We will also assess the performance of this government, their inability to effectively tackle crime and criminal activity, their inability to deliver adequate health care to all the people, and their failure to address agriculture in the country. And finally, we will do a performance appraisal on the leadership of the Prime Minister herself.
Yeah, man.
We will fully unmask her and remove all that makeup and botox. In other words, today we will totally remove whatever little beauty is left, and the true beast will be exposed. Over the last 5 years, they have spent over $400 billion. And what do we have to show for it? Can we say that our lives are better than 5 years ago? And $400 billion later? Are there any more beds in the hospital? Are there any more medicines? Are there any more nurses? But instead they rush off and build another hospital to fill it with what? And with who? This is at the heart of their modus operandi. Their corrupt transfer of public funds to friends and families through unnecessary mega protests. They have been boasting, and I want Congress to pay keen attention, because this is where they fool you. They have been boasting about growth, but they are hiding the fact that growth has been extremely low. For instance, in 2011, our growth was 0%, and by 2014, it reached a mere 1.9%. We must bear in mind that last year's budget was the largest budget in the country's history. They must come clean and be honest with the people. Clearly, they were unable to stimulate any growth in our economy. They promised in their manifesto that they would, and I quote directly from their manifesto, Prosperity for All, quote, develop innovative strategies to achieve sustainable growth and diversification of the economy in order to reduce our dependence on energy, create good jobs, and generate a new source of wealth, end of quote. However, the energy sector from 2010 to 2015 continued to contribute approximately 40% of our nation's income. But what is even more damning is that growth in this sector fell from 2.8% in 2010 to 1.0% in 2014. Furthermore, negative growth was actually recorded in this sector in 2011. Take for instance, our local crude oil production. They are not telling the country. They are not telling the country the truth, which is under this government, under this UNC corrupt government, our crude oil production actually fell. For example, our crude oil production fell from 98,200 barrels per day in 2010 to 81,300 barrels per day in 2014. And if that is not bad enough, we are not only faced with increasing volume in oil production, we are also faced with increasing oil prices. What they also would not say is that at Point Lisas, our flagship industrial estate, which earns a significant amount of foreign exchange for our country, this flagship industrial estate has been experiencing for quite a while major difficulty with the sharp reduction in natural gas supply, which has resulted in billions of dollars losses to our country. Billions of dollars losses in the much needed foreign exchange for our country. While captains of industry and leaders of those companies at Point Lisas continue to cry out on a daily basis for a more reliable supply of natural gas, the Minister of Energy, in his height of incompetence today, has failed to address this critical issue. So they did not diversify the economy, and worse yet, they were unable to stimulate any growth in this important sector, which is still at the heart of our economy. But what about other sectors? Growth in the agricultural sector stood at 0.8%. How can our country make meaningful steps towards attaining food sovereignty and reducing our food import bill when in the last fiscal year, growth in the agricultural sector was a mere 0.8%. Conversely, imports, which include food imports, have increased steadily over the period 2010 to 2013 by a whopping 36.4%. At the same time, growth in the manufacturing sector has consistently fallen from 2010 to 2015. Furthermore, negative growth has been registered in this sector in 2012 and 2013. Clearly, no headway was made with respect to the economic diversification, although it is critically important for our economy to have other strong sectors in addition to the volatile energy sector. And I want Congress to pay close attention, because in their campaign, they will be spouting all kinds of misinformation. This is a major failure of the UNC government, especially given that they have presented the largest budget in our country's history, spent over $400 billion, and we have seen absolutely no growth in any of these sectors. They have been boasting about unemployment falling, saying that unemployment has fallen from 5.9% in 2010 to 3.3% in 2014. However, this hides the fact that we have seen an unprecedented spending on make-work programs such as CPEP and URP, while the business community cries out given this artificial shortage of labor in the country. Therefore, while the unemployment numbers have fallen through these make-work programs, there have not been any increase in sustainable jobs. Additionally, jobs in the manufacturing sector, which would contribute to driving growth, remain unfilled. Recently, we are hearing that they have instituted thousands of more contracts as they extend even further the short-term unsustainable CPEP make-work program. And we know that is only to win votes. The real question is, how is the economy expected to survive with no additional income or foreign exchange? Let us declare, they have not developed any new revenue stream. Imagine, they continue to boast that inflation is decreasing, but we must always clarify what is meant by inflation rate. I want you to pay close attention, because they will come and tell you that inflation fall and later on inflation down. Inflation rate is simply the rate by which prices increase and not the actual increase in prices. In other words, when they say inflation fell, it does not mean that prices fell. It is only the rate by which those prices were increasing that fell. And that is why you as a consumer is confused when you go to the grocery, because when they say to you with big headlines in the newspaper that inflation rate has fallen by 2 and 3 and 4%, the harsh reality that faces you in the grocery is that those very prices are still high and some actually increase. That is why you are confused. So don't be fooled. As we unmask this UNC propaganda, let us further unmask this data. Actually, the true measurement of the prices for certain goods and services is what is called the retail price index. This very retail price index has increased steadily from 75.8 points in 2010 to 96.8 points in 2014. This is an increase of 21 points. What that really means is that for you, the consumer, is that these goods and services identified in the retail price index have actually increased. I wonder if Comrades are connected. What that really means is that prices have increased while they tell you that the inflation rate is falling. They will never tell you this because their intention is all about trying to fool you, the people, just to win votes. As consumers, we must demand that they tell us about the real price index, the real price increases, and we must move away from all of this technical jargon and tell them stop trying to fool people. But this afternoon, I also want to tell you that as these prices increase for us, the consumers, this UNC government has also burdened us with a huge national debt. You see, the total government debt has increased by an incredible 64.5% over the period 2010 to 2015. Our expenditure has also increased by 38.7%. Additionally, there was a persistent annual deficit, given that each year our expenditure was greater than our revenue, which means that as a country, every year we have been spending more than we have been earning. Today, here in Fyzabad, this Charlie King Junction, I dare any one of them to challenge this data. This is not my data or the Joint Trade Union Movement data. This data is taken directly from the Central Bank of Trinidad and Tobago. In fact, the International Rating Agency, Moody's Investors Services, in April of this year downgraded Trinidad and Tobago to a Baa2 and changed the outlook from stable to negative. This is an international rating agency speaking. Therefore, the only logical conclusion we can make is that this UNC government has failed miserably in managing our economy. They have successfully made us a box-trained country because while they attempt to box us in with their public relations, lies and deceit, they continue to drain the treasury. They have also taken the country from bad governance to the worst type of governance, the likes of which this country has never imagined or experienced. Imagine, after all that mismanagement of the economy, they are seeking another 5 years. Imagine that. After all of that, they're coming to tell you they want another 5 years. But over the last 5 years, this UNC government used their majority in parliament to manipulate, abuse, disrespect, and run it in the most haphazard and vice manner. It is the most dictatorial and arrogant government they are facing. And so, in the most arrogant manner, with their assistance of the Speaker, they went so far as to use the majority to remove the leader of the opposition from the parliament. This has nothing to do with whether or not you support PNM. To remove the leader of the opposition from our nation's parliament is a direct attack on our democracy and the rights of the citizens. You understand that? This is not about protecting Dr. Rowley. It's an attack on our democracy and the rights of citizens in this country. They are prepared to cut down any opposition or any voice that dares to speak the truth or dares to identify this UNC government's involvement in massive corruption. Once you open your mouth to talk, they are prepared to cut you down or send people to disrupt you. This UNC government is not about having a parliament to make laws for peace, order, and good government. Their sole intention is to keep themselves in power to continue to steal from our treasury. We must never forget their unbridled and vicious attack on the DPP, the Police Complaints Authority, the credit unions, and the Joint Trade Union Movement. They have compromised the Integrity Commission and made virtually ineffective the Teaching Service Commission, the Public Service Commission, the Police Service Commission, and the Equal Opportunities Commission. All of them they have made virtually inoperable. We must never forget their shameless attempt to steal the election and run off with the Treasury by introducing a runoff bill. We must never forget their attempt to free their finances by surreptitiously using the Parliament Section 34. This UNC government has shown time and again a tendency towards suppressing any voice and to engage in actions that are likely to fascism. We can all remember the questionable and nefarious state of emergency in 2011. Its only purpose was to silence the Joint Trade Union movement, which was making deep inroads as we campaigned across the length and breadth of the country, pointing out the hypocrisy and betrayal and attack on workers with their unfair and unjust 5% wage gap. We must never forget that under that Kamala failed state of emergency, without evidence or just cause, they locked up over 7,000 black youths. We must never forget how those young black men were herded like animals in the full view of their communities. to prison and locked up for weeks without evidence of any wrongdoing. To date, not one of them was ever charged. That is how vicious this government can be. You want another 5 years? Remember how they tried to fool the country by reporting that there was a plot to assassinate the Prime Minister and even got people arrested for that? Remember how it was later revealed that those reports were false and mischievous and was only meant to distract us from their failed state of emergency? And when the joint trade union movement decided that this country must never forget this most hideous act by us staging a silent protest on August 21st, 2013, they sent their lackey, remember, they sent their lackey in the top echelons of the police service, the then Deputy Commissioner of Police, one Mervyn Richardson, to detain me. Remember that? Sometimes the problem is that we don't remember enough, you know. Well, with his questionable non-action in the Emailgate scandal, having his leave bought out on 2 occasions, being placed as strategic officer at the National Operations Center after his retirement, and now his name is being called in the Ganja Gate cover-up at the PM residence. So when we demonstrated to highlight Kamala's failed state of emergency, we can now understand his foolish statements about that event. But you remember when he said he saw sticks and bandanas, and he actually formed the opinion that a coup was in progress. You want to think about that? Deputy Commissioner of Police in the year of our Lord 2013, with all of this technology, yeah? He saw sticks and bandanas, and he formed the opinion that a coup was in progress. Using that as a justification, he detained me and tried to stop the demonstration. He had one purpose, and one purpose only, and that was to prevent us from reminding the country about his Kamala's failed state of emergency. Just imagine, rumors have it that this same man Richardson, stands before his congregation every Sunday preaching the word of God. Imagine that. And I guess the most enjoyable part of that service is when he goes to collect money in this parish. Well, as it now unfolds, this same Mervyn Richardson has a lot of serious questions to answer. He has a lot of serious questions to answer about the role he played in that Ganjagate issue at the Prime Minister's residence in Philippines. First of all, what knowledge he had about the discovery of that barrel at the Prime Minister's residence in April of 2016. And if this is so, meaning if he has knowledge, he must tell the public why did he choose to report it to the Minister of National Security, a politician, and not his immediate boss, the acting commissioner. The police service is supposed to be totally independent of the government, and this is enshrined in the Constitution. Further, as Deputy Commissioner of Police, becoming aware of the discovery of illegal drugs at the PM residence, what investigation did he initiate to determine who placed it there, for what reason, whether it was for trafficking, or whether it was for personal use by some member of the BN household, or whether it was left there by someone who was in some private party or fete at the BN residence. Subsequently, was this reported to the National Security Council? What we have here is a clear case of perverting the cause of justice. With this Richardson, this man Richardson at the center of all of this. With all of those questions hanging over his head, today at Charlie King Junction, we demand the immediate removal of Marvin Richardson from his current position of strategic officer at the National Operations Center. The country deserves no less. And what about the Prime Minister herself? As head of the National Security Council, for her to not know of such serious matter involving the discovery of marijuana at her private residence, whether it was an allegation or whether it was confirmed, regardless of the quantity, for her to not know is either a lie or a dereliction of duty. If she is found wanting in her performance as head of the National Security Council, how can she provide security for the people of Trinidad and Tobago? What is the purpose of her National Security Advisor, the then National Security Advisor, the motorboat fella, the fella who we now know was trying to get back to her and talking about forming some party, but which party, when it was foolish to follow him, when he formed it, he didn't take all that support right back to her. That motorboat fella, you ask him one thing, and he's talking a million things. What is the purpose of her then National Security Advisor if on a critical matter of illegal drugs at the Prime Minister's residence, which admittedly he was informed, and he didn't tell her? No, stupid. But if this illegal drugs was found, and the point was made before, if this illegal drug was found on the residence of an ordinary citizen, the same Richardson and the police would certainly would have responded differently. Can you imagine if this was Ancel Roget, David Abdullah, Ramesh Moran, or Keith Rowley, or even you? What would have been the police response? And I often make the point, I don't mind if they feel the smart. That is up to them. They can feel anything about themselves when they take the thing. But you see, when you feel you smart and I stupid, that is when I have a problem. Trinidad and Tobago, they are taking all of us for fools. We are not stupid. They bluntly refuse to answer these questions. And when they are exposed for being the most corrupt government, in the most vicious way, they attack those who dare to expose them. You will recall, on the 5th of December last year, all of us here, and others, were staging a national march and rally against the Prime Minister and our UNC government on corruption with the capital K. Remember that? While we were doing that, she again, with the support of her stooge, the fellow who just take exam by himself, he alone in our exam room. She again, with the support of her stooge, the speaker, used the cover of Parliament to attack me personally, a private citizen who has no access to the parliament, and therefore no form of rebuttal. When that failed, she then used the petroleum company of Trinidad and Tobago to launch the most vicious attack at the heart of the oilfield workers' trade union by attempting to remove me from the office of the President General in a most undemocratic way. Doing this by attempting to send me back to work, and even that failed. In recent times, we cannot recall such brutal and vindictive actions taken against any trade union leader by a government. But, according to Psalm 91, verses 7 and 8, and I quote, "A thousand shall fall at thy side, and 10,000 at their right hand, but it shall not come nigh thee. Only with thine eyes shall thou behold and see the reward of the wicked and good." You only have to wait not long again. Rest assured, this OWTU will neither forget nor forgive Kamala, MacLeod, and her corrupt UNC government. Because this afternoon, on this Labor Day platform, we want to remind them of the mantra that those who seek to destroy the OWTU shall only end up destroying themselves. But make no mistake about it, this systemic attack on our democracy is similar to that of the Nazis in the 1970s and 40s. This is now being practiced by this UNC government. We must be clear in our minds that this is the worst type of governance the country has ever had. But if we do not pay close attention as to who is ultimately responsible for this, we may fail to do our duty on September the 7th. In their manifesto, they talked about, and I quote, making our society safe for our citizens. Well, that makes no sense to the families of some 2,000 plus people who have been murdered between 2010 and 2015. That makes no sense to the family of Dana Sidahal, whose murders still remain unsolved. We still want to know what happened to the $7 million worth of marijuana found in a 40-foot container of pressure washers. The country still wants to know what happened to the $34 million worth of marijuana found in a 40-foot container of specially seasoned chicken. And of course, what happened to the $640 billion cocaine in the orange juice bin? All of this and not one arrest. Well, we now know where some of that marijuana went. They have deliberately dismantled our security arrangements, leaving our borders totally unmanned and unprotected, allowing free access for the importation of drugs and guns into the country, claiming that crime will be fought in the streets and not in the water. Can you imagine giving them another 5 years? And after they refuse to honor the contract for the offshore patrol vessels, and in their last year in office, after the guns, ammunition and drugs entered our borders, wreaking havoc and mayhem in the lives of so many of our citizens, with over 2,000 being killed. After causing all of that, and almost at the end of their term in office, they shamelessly hustled to purchase 2 oversized pirogues. With the criminals having unlimited access to guns and ammunition, the question for us as citizens is, was that deliberate? Who stands to benefit? But more importantly, as citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, after 5 years of Kamala horror, do we feel any safer today in 2015? Their manifesto had also talked about food security. But less than a year after coming into office, they started bulldozing prime agricultural land with the destruction of food crops, with total disrespect for our farmers and disregard for agriculture. This UNC government bulldozed prime agricultural land in Dabadi, Dastress Enterprise, Egypt, Tres, Endeavour, Debe, Princess Town, Waterloo, Caripichaima, Arena Road, Vancouver, Castlefield, among other areas. And let us not forget the 1,000 acres of land they bulldozed in Mandezir, making way for their unnecessary corrupt Debe to Mandezir highway. Some say that highway is a highway not to Point Fortin, but a highway to the bank, because it made a lot of people rich. This trend of bulldozing farmers and destroying prime agricultural land and its produce was persistent throughout the life of this UNC government. This one-ton bulldozing of farmers culminated in the recent destruction of crops in the Wharf Road, Chagaramas. As a country, we must be deeply disturbed by claims that this government surreptitiously disposed of 8 acres of prime real estate in Chagaramas to a personal friend by way of a lease for next to nothing. Today, here in Fyzabad, at this historic Charlie King Junction, we in the Joint Trade Union Movement commit our full support for the Wharf Road farmers and all farmers on their ongoing struggle to reclaim their land. The Wharf Road farmers were bullied off their land by this UNC government, and today we demand that they be given back their land. But what about healthcare? Over the last 5 years, we have seen more deaths of mothers and babies than any other time in our country's history. And only recently, a mother had to suffer the gross indignity of giving birth on the pavement after 5 years and over $400 billion they squandered. And we say that we have confidence in our health system. Our hearts must bleed when we hear cries of so many mothers and families who lost their loved ones in our health system. They are trying to fool you and sit up. But everyone here in Fyzabad knows fully well, too often most of our people, especially our senior citizens with chronic diseases, cannot get the critical medicines they urgently require. Just imagine, it is now normal for us to wait more than 24 hours to get attention at our hospitals. And then we have to wait a further 24 hours or more just to get a bed. And when hospitals do not have basic medication, we have to purchase them at private drugstores at a much higher cost. Important diagnostic tests, procedures and life-saving surgeries are scheduled in most cases for over 1 and 2 years, with many people dying before their medical appointment. But they, with their stolen millions, can afford the best medical care, best nursing home here and abroad. Remember when the Prime Minister got ill recently? Or she faked the illness, whichever one? She went to the Gulfview Medical Center and not the San Fernando General Hospital like the rest of us. Today, this country is still suffering from a severe shortage of nurses and doctors. Clearly, their existing healthcare system is not working for us. Yet, the UNC government built a multi-million-dollar hospital in Cuba, whilst the people in Point 14 and the Southwestern Peninsula are yet to receive their long-awaited hospital, which the UNC government committed to build. What is the real purpose of this Cuba hospital other than to facilitate more corruption? By the way, whilst Kamla condemned Patrick Manning for using Chinese labor, she deceitfully used the same Chinese labor to build that hospital. And therefore, we cannot help but come to the inescapable conclusion that this government has failed miserably in improving adequate health care for the people. And now, let us examine the workers' agenda. Remember we said we have 5 areas, huh? Yes, June. Have a treat for your coming. Let us examine the workers' agenda. You will recall that the Joint Trade Union movement stated on many occasions that before coming into government, they had committed to implementing the workers' agenda. You would also recall that they committed to placing workers at the center of the country's development, but instead, workers were placed at the center of their vicious attack. We had stated publicly that Errol McLeod, same fella, Errol McLeod was sent into government to represent the interests of workers and to ensure the full implementation of the workers' agenda. That was his mission, which mission he then accepted. But today, Labor Day 5 years later, as we publicly expose the facts for yet another time here at Charlie King Junction, you be the judge. You be the judge as to whether Errol K. McLeod served the workers' interests or whether he served himself. Very early in their term of office, he said nothing when the teaching assistants were fired. He said nothing when the U.S. consulate workers were fired. He stood silent when the URP, CPEP and UTT workers were fired, and also stood silent when thousands of workers whose contracts were terminated only because they were perceived by Kamla and the UNC to be PNM support. What is even worse is that he, as Minister of Labour, publicly chastised the TCL workers for exercising their legal right when the employer refused to give them a just settlement at the bargain. Not a word from the same matter when the TCL management, in a most vindictive way, locked down all the union officers and activists after 90 days of legal strike. After that strike ended in May of 2012. Remember that? He remained silent as well when 68 workers were fired by NP management without just cause. What is worse is that after the union, having won that matter in the industrial court, with the court ordering those workers back to work immediately, the NP management went in the dead of night, same night, and filed an injunction preventing those workers from going back to their jobs. So vicious is the NP management. And in the most arrogant way, they are prepared to go even to the Privy Council just to prevent those workers from returning to work. This coming from a state company, the cabinet must have known about that decision and supported it. MacLeod and the Prime Minister must have known. But through all of this, MacLeod stayed silent. As a former trade union leader, not a word in defense of the trade union movement when Kamala's failed state of emergency was called against us. Instead, he went into Parliament and supported a state of emergency against working people struggling for their rights. While many union officers at Tiantec and Petrotrin were victimized by their management, having them suspended without justification, with Petrotrin going so far as to fire a branch president for arriving 4 hours late for work, whilst all these atrocities continue, MacLeod said nothing. MacLeod said nothing. And if that was not bad enough, remember when, I wonder if I should say this. Anyway, as trade unionists, we come together. As trade unionists, we come together when we're supposed to be defending against the enemy. Regardless of who is eating our food, and who is paid by whom, and who wants to fight elections under so-called independent to go back and give it to the MC, I will still make it stay. And if that was bad enough, all of those things, and MacLeod stayed silent. If those things were not bad enough, remember when he attempted to have the president of the PSA jailed for alleged contempt of court? Let us not forget that. Employers taking out injunctions left, right, and center, preventing trade unions from doing their work, with a barrage of pre-action protocol letters attempting to silence trade union leaders from speaking out about corruption at state enterprises, which corruption we must be aware of. Their lawyer friends are given huge amount of money in breach for frivolous matters that they know they are going to lose. Using their deep pockets, they abuse the court by appealing every matter over and over again. But let us look at this issue of contract labor. Contract labor, which is a direct threat to job security, is an issue he campaigned bitterly against in his previous incarnation. But now, with brulitis, you know what is brulitis? What is all you know? And that is why I say, don't even try to put too close to that guy, you know, and then the lights flashing. Do like this. So he campaigned bitterly against contract labor in his previous incarnation. But now, contract labor has been fully embraced by him, because right in the Ministry of Labor itself, under his direct supervision, contract labor is the order of the day. As part of the workers' agenda, one of his tasks was to simplify the process of gaining union recognition for workers. Instead, he did the complete opposite. For an entire year, workers in this country could not have their application for union recognition process because there was no registration, recognition and certification board. No board in place. Even though they make the application, they couldn't get through simply because he did not ensure that there was a board. But let us now look at negotiation. In true UNC deceptive style, he is now boasting about settling over 100 negotiations, and without evidence, the number keeps increasing every time they speak. But what are the facts around this matter? He failed to is that a significant number of those major negotiations was settled only through Peter Straw. What he is not telling the country is that in several instances, trade unions had to drag them to court for a settlement. You and Kamla, you and Kamla never give us anything. It was the union and workers who struggled for the settlement of all of those negotiations. And when closely examined, you would realize that most of those collective agreements are still outside of the current period. But even so, what about those that have not been settled at all? And you want to make the list? You see, I heard, much to my horror, yesterday on a radio program, and sometimes we question the interests of those radio announcers. I heard on a radio program, they loaded the question. Now this thing about destroying what we have to do today was started quite a while, and yesterday was another installment of that, yesterday morning, with a loaded question, without even presenting any facts or evidence. They asked the country if it is that trade unions are struggling to maintain their relevance. Can you imagine that? All the things I just described are reality, but they would ask the country the question because they say MacLeod announced that all those negotiations settled. If we are struggling to remain relevant. Well, I want to tell them something. That as long as there is exploitation of workers, as long as there are corrupt government with corrupt prime ministers, as their cabinet predecessor, trade union will always remain relevant. But even so, what about those that have not been settled at all? I ask you, MacLeod must tell the truth. But unfortunately, the truth and UNC cannot dwell in the same house. They have not settled TSCG, Hilton and Massey's Technologies with CW. Not settled. There are still several outstanding settlements under Banking, Insurance and General Workers Union, including TTMF, Kariri, Exim Bank, Swimcol, EMA, Eastern Credit Union, Kali, and Export TT. Cipriani College workers who fall under his ministry are still reeling under the 5% gap. Just last week, and you heard it earlier, the postal workers had to protest outside the CPO office and at the Ministry of Finance. Ministry of Finance, 10 million or 11 million man. Their debate negotiations for the new period has not even started, and prison and fire officers are still awaiting a settlement for their long outstanding negotiation. And I want to advise my comrades, it is not settled until it's settled. They will try to fool you for you to make statements. So don't be fooled by them. Today it's still outstanding. And as for the OWTU, listen to this. As for the OWTU, we still have outstanding negotiations at Petrotrin, TNTech, PowerGen, MB, UE, UTT, among others. All of these collective agreement periods have expired and are now into their new period of collective bargaining. Furthermore, their vindictiveness was clearly exposed in the TNTech negotiation. While this negotiation is now before open court, the Attorney General, pay close attention, Comrade, the Attorney General, who is not party to this matter, intervenes on behalf of the Ministry of Finance, who also is not party to the matter. His intervention was an attempt to influence the court not to give the TNTech workers more than 6%. While this is occurring, the senior staffers who are not represented by OWQ at TNTech, they are being offered by the same TNTech wage increases ranging from 15 to 21%. It is clear that they are attempting to punish OWQ members. And for what? Simply because we continue to identify their corruption. But I want to tell you something here this afternoon. If they're looking, wanting or waiting for this person to come to them or go to any minister and say, boss, you was my friend long time, settle these negotiations because workers suffering. That and one face they will never see. And if any member of the Irish Workers Trade Union wants this President General, this 5th President General of the Irish Workers Trade Union, to go and beg any government, past or present, especially this corrupt government, if you want me to go and beg for your negotiations to settle, find another President General. That happened. Because you know why? You deserve a just and fair settlement, and you, along with your union, must demand that you get a fair and just settlement. And what about the retirees? What about the retirees? The TNTech retirees, the Petrotrin retirees? What about their contribution to national growth and national development? They in their earlier life, they in their work life would have contributed enormously to the development of the country. And today, they are still being punished only because they are from OWQ stock. What about the Occupational Safety and Health Authority? And Comrade, I want you to say, we coming close. We coming close. Media, we coming close. Because we have another mascot, and the one he was surviving just a while ago. We coming close. Stay tuned. We want you to get it first. And what about the Occupational Safety and Health Authority? The Health Authority falls directly under the same Minister of Labour, and it has failed to adequately give lawful protection to workers while at work. The Health inspectors are contract workers who are often afraid to rule against any errant employers. They are afraid because they fear of losing their jobs and their contract work. This has resulted in serious injuries and sometimes deaths to workers. Just ask any worker from anywhere, do you have confidence in the USH inspectors? Today, even as we have the USH Act, workers are still being intimidated and forced to work under the most unsafe, unhealthy and inhumane working conditions. And when they complain, they are disciplined and sometimes fired. According to the USH Act, this is against the law. But they are offered no protection by these contract USH inspectors. And then to round it off, as a former trade union leader, now Minister of Labour, Errol McLeod brought a most anti-worker industrial relations bill. The most anti-worker industrial relations bill ever laid in Parliament. It is a bill that sought to drive a dagger in the very heart of trade unions. But you see, after abandoning his mission, and while failing to defend workers' interests, he is now making cute statements about trade unionists fantasizing with mannequins. Since he could say that, today I want to publicly ask him if he is aware of any trade unionist, past or present, who engages in domestic violence. Furthermore, he must tell the country who brought the cabinet vote to buy out the lead of former ACP Dick. He must also tell us if there is any connection whatsoever between him and former ACP Dick. He must tell the country who was acting Prime Minister when the decision to buy out ACP Dick's lead was made. He must also tell us how was it possible for someone to overturn a policy implemented by the Commissioner of Police when the Commissioner of Police was given full authority by Parliament to independently regulate the police service. We have not forgotten you, Macron. You see, there are things that you know, we know about you, and there are things that you don't know, we know about you. It is a long campaign, comrade. It is a long campaign, and we're just waiting for you. We're not there with the other with you. We're waiting for you. We still want to know. We still want to know who is the minister referred to in the TNT Mirror article dated Friday, October 29, 2010. Who is the minister involved in that major scandal that led to the murder of a worker while at work? But MacLeod is just one minister in a corrupt UNC government. The corrupt UNC government. This country has had to painfully endure at an unprecedented level both allegations and revelations of corruption week after week. It was no rest for them as they stole from the public purse, from the NGC, Public Relations Fund and Wastewater Project to NSC Ministerial Bank transfers, from Petrotrin Southwest Soldado Project and their bunkering deals, which incidentally has returned where they are now about to pocket hundreds of billions of dollars in another diesel racket at Petrotrin. Added to that is the rampant corruption at TNT, from the live sport program to the controversial drum interchange, from FCB to NP service station contract. Their feeling frenzy is not limited to large-scale enterprises alone, because not even Swimcon is being scared, especially in this election season. We are now hearing about the major racket at the EMA with the issuing of certificate of environmental clearances in very questionable circumstances. And we'll hear more about that in coming weeks. Accumulatively, we are talking about billions of dollars flowing from the Treasury to private vaults, specially constructed walls and houses in Pinal, Gulf City and elsewhere, in the construction of foreign shopping malls and foreign bank accounts of corrupt government officials. Money flowing from the Treasury to all those places. This long arm of corruption has even reached some churches with their attempt to buy support from some shameless, bitter-food religious leaders. But I want to tell those this evening, comrades, I want to tell those so-called religious leaders, there are none so blind as those with eyes and who refuse to see, and there are none so deaf as those with ears and who refuse to hear. Just to eat the food, they will turn a blind eye on rampant corruption. They are shameless. It's all about eating of food. You want to preach to me? Yeah? Where's they drink coffee? We don't drink coffee. We're not drinking coffee. The Prime Minister must be held accountable for all of this. From Section 34, Fiasco to Email Gate, Prison Gate, Petrotrin Gate, NGC Gate, NP Gate, NEC Gate, and now Gandhi quite a while, the country was misled into believing that it was a cabal controlling her. But instead, the real story is that it is the other way around, because she is the head of the cabal, the one who is directing the rest of the cabal. This reminds me of the biblical story of Jezebel, where the people did not know that Jezebel herself was the real driving force behind all the wickedness that was occurring in the land. Today, on this Labor Day platform, we want to directly question the leadership of Kamala Fyzabad as Prime Minister of this country. Firstly, she created the biggest cabinet in the history of Trinidad and Tobago. But even more extravagantly, in 2012, in one of her many reshuffles, she appointed 35 government ministers. Our research has shown that this is the largest cabinet per capita, not just in the Caribbean or even in the Western Hemisphere, but it was the largest cabinet per capita in the world. Let us be clear, that meant more government ministers than the 29 government MPs. In fact, just imagine India, which has some 1.3 billion people, they have only 63 government ministers. Now compare that to Trinidad and Tobago, unlike Kamala Fyzabad with just 1.3 million people. We had 35 ministers. That is more than half of theirs. But not only did she create history with the biggest cabinet, she created history with the most amount of government ministers fired. In less than 5 years of her leadership, she has had to fire and or remove some 22 government ministers. This could never be strong leadership. It is a clear demonstration of poor judgment on the part of the Prime Minister to have selected those persons in the first place. Even her inability, or should I say, even her ability to recognize her ministers in wrongdoing was always an issue. Just imagine, after being shown her sports minister, the very first minister she appointed, her good friend, after being shown a video of him fairly rolling some unknown substance, she could not recognize him and therefore did nothing. But if we did not know then, we now certainly know why she could not recognize him. While in opposition, she made a major issue with Patrick Panning and the coat of arms on PM1. Remember that? Big issue. But as soon as she became Prime Minister, she took full possession of our country's national security helicopter, using it as her own personal transportation on a daily basis. Listen, man, I could hardly sleep in the night when this woman flying over my head to go home. And they say it's your flight when woman pass over your head and a couple around the house. Traveling on our country's road like the rest of us was not good enough for our Prime Minister. She prefers to be high every day. High in the air. High in the air. Every day, this country has to endure the daily spectacle of the helicopters joyriding with our national security helicopters. From very early, we saw the signs. From very early, we saw the signs of our poor leadership. Immediately after coming into office, in order to stay at the Gopal, a private contractor raised many questions. What is worse, after leaving the Gopal, she refused to stay at the official residence of the Prime Minister and opted to stay at her own private residence. This is a man. We put up with too much nonsense to this woman. And further, she used her private residence to conduct official cabinet business. It was quickly evident of her disregard for officialdom, procedures and protocol befitting of a prime minister. For this prime minister and our government, it was controversy after controversy every Monday morning with numerous allegations and revelations of corruption. We must not forget those hand-selected appointees to state boards, the majority of whom were unqualified, with a significant number of them being bought with false papers. As a consequence of her poor judgment, the country suffered with respective ministries not being able to settle down to provide a much-needed quality service to the people. Remember how she promised that she will remove the Public Sector Negotiating Committee, the PSNC, but she simply changed the name and left it intact. Remember when she promised us fixed election day, referendum with right to recall, constitutional reform, fixed term for Prime Minister, but instead she gave us runoff. Remember how she promised pensions for everybody from age 60, didn't implement it and then blame it on a misprint. Big Panda, blame it on a misprint. Now she is saying, if you put her back, she will give land to the squatters, house for $100, and many other election promises. All of this to fool the people just to get their votes. And today, the smallest child is aware of John Warner's huge financial contribution to the UNC. But with a straight face, this Prime Minister tells the country she never received a cent from John Warner. Clearly, this Prime Minister cannot be trusted. And what about her work ethic? But recently we heard something about that. Remember we doing an assessment on the performance of the Prime Minister? And what about her work ethics? We are now hearing in the media allegations that the Prime Minister often had long weekends, starting Friday night and ending Wednesday night. The rumor was circulated for quite a while. But if a Prime Minister is having regular 5-day weekends, this has to be very poor work ethics. Two former ministers who knew the Prime Minister, the country heard them making public statements that this Prime Minister has a problem and needs help. We want to ask her some pertinent questions. But before we do that, we want to ask her directly. Bring her up.
Come
But let us argue. After all, we need answers. Does the Prime Minister have a problem? If so, what is the nature of that problem? If in fact she has a problem, did she seek assistance for that problem? Because if a Prime Minister has a problem and that problem is not addressed, certainly the country will suffer as a result. This evening, after hearing all these issues, we have some burning questions that must be answered right here at Charlie King Junction Fyzabad. And the questions are, is the Prime Minister guilty of deception and fooling the people? Is the Prime Minister guilty of betraying workers and the people? Is the Prime Minister guilty of leading a government that is silencing any opposing voices? Is the Prime Minister guilty of embarrassing the country? Is the Prime Minister guilty of exposing our borders? Is the Prime Minister guilty of leading the most corrupt government in the history of Trinidad and Tobago? But before we go, we have just a few more questions. But first, before I ask the final question, let me ask this question directly. Do you smoke marijuana, Prime Minister? In other words, we want to hear you. We want to hear you now. Is the Prime Minister guilty of dereliction of duty? Is the Prime Minister guilty of the worst leadership we have ever had in Trinidad and Tobago? Madam Prime Minister, politically speaking, you have been found guilty in the court of public opinion here at historic Charlie King Junction Fyzabad this 7 June 19, in the year of our Lord 2015. Your sentencing is reserved for September 7, 2015. When the country will determine the term you will serve in the political wilderness. Officers of the People's Court, take her away. Constant vicious sales in over the last 5 years, from one corruption scandal to another. This country must never again experience this type of bad governance. We cannot afford to turn a blind eye to that level of corruption, turn a blind eye to that level of nepotism, turn a blind eye to tyrannic and despotic behavior. In other words, love for UNC must not trump love for country. All of these issues must be taken into consideration as you decide on September 7th. It is without doubt that our country has faced the worst government, the most corrupt government, the most dictatorial government. We have no choice but to save our country for Trinidad and Tobago to live. This corrupt UNC-type governance must die. They thought that their reign of terror will never end, but time and fate has caught up with them, and without any option had to call the election. They are saying that government is working for you, but in reality, it is government working for UNC. It is now clear that Trinidad and Tobago has lost confidence in them. And so today, on this Charlie King Junction, in the spirit of Butler, the martyrs, and all who made sacrifices for a better Trinidad and Tobago, in their name, this evening, I make this prediction. I am predicting that come September the 7th, this corrupt UNC government shall lose the 2015 general election. That is what they do want us to predict. That is why they're trying to stop us. But we have to be careful. We cannot afford to be complacent. We cannot trust them. If we are not vigilant, they may very well steal the elections. To prevent that, you must take personal responsibility to ensure that you are registered on time, that you check the electoral list, and you must ensure that your friends and families and associates all do the same. As the labor movement, we must remain strong, united, militant, and fiercely independent to challenge any government. We must be consistent, and we must be respected at all costs and at all times. As patriotic citizens, we all have a profound duty and responsibility to rescue our country. We must replace this hopelessness and despair with a new vision, a different vision, a vision for a better Trinidad and Tobago for our children and for future generations. A Trinidad and Tobago where all our citizens are treated equally on the basis of social justice with a decent standard of living for all. So as we look towards the sky with our faith in Almighty God and in the true conviction of our cause, let us all, Fyzabad, let us all go forward ever, backward never, forward ever, backward never, forward ever, backward never, because we will never, ever, ever, ever surrender. I thank you. But before we go, and we must bid farewell. We can't take all of this prediction and not bid farewell. This evening, we want to bid farewell to the most corrupt government this country has ever experienced. We want to say goodbye to them one by one. I want to send Jim. I want to send all of them away. Come on around here. Stay silent. You must walk away. Stephen Geddes, the Kaufman. Remember he? The Kaufman. Vincent Gypsy. Rupert. Coupe. Ikoto. The man with the coupe.
Contract workers and UTT and paying people big salaries in the most questionable run. Vivian Barrage, yeah? Yeah, Mr. Barrage. What is it?